So let's finish that setup of the products table, which I need for my first little demo code. Here in the table editor, so to say, in the workbench, we can define how a product's entry should look like. For that, we first of all define the name of a field, ID, and the data type. And for the ID, an integer is fine. We can also check that it should be the primary key by which records in this table will be identified, that it must not be null, that it should be unique, that should definitely be the case, if it should hold binary data, which is not the case, if it's unsigned, so if it holds no negative values, which should also be the case because that should be an integer starting at 1 and then incrementing. Here, if it is zero fill, and for us important, if it's auto-incrementing, and that should be the case, because every new record should receive that automatically, and it should be a higher number than in the last record. Now, a product also typically has a title, and there I'll use a varchar, which is basically a string. I'll just define that it may be up to 255 characters long, and longer titles will simply be cut off. So that is something to keep in mind. It must also not be null, so we have to have a value in there, but I don't need any other setting here. For a product, I also want to have a price. And here, I want to have a double so that we can enter decimal places. This must also not be null. I also want to have a description, which now will not be a varchar, but will be text. And if you're wondering which data types are available, that is exactly what I meant. You should definitely consult a full SQL course to learn more about the available data types and how to work with them. So here I got my text, which is simply a longer text than the varchar, which has a limitation. And I will have an image URL, which I'll also set to varchar 255, which means longer URLs also won't work. With that, I defined how my product should look like. You can leave everything else as it is, and then on the bottom right again, click on Apply here. It shows you the SQL statement it will execute, and you could execute this on your own, for example in Node, of course, to always create this new table. Here, we'll do it in the workbench, so click Apply, Close, and now on Tables, you see the new Products table. And if you click this icon here, on the very right, you can see the entries in there. By the way, you also see the SQL query that was executed to look into that. And that is pretty similar to the query we're executing here. So now that the table is set up, we just need to enter one dummy data so that we have something to fetch. And I will simply add a book here, with a price of, let's say, $12.99. Description, this is an awesome book, and also an image URL. Now, if you got problems copying a value in here, you simply have to type it manually. Copying also didn't work for me. Of course, you can also enter some dummy value and just live with no image being displayed. Now, let's also enter an ID here, though that should be auto-generated if you don't do it. Click on Apply in the bottom right, Apply here, Close. And now if you again click on this icon here, next to Products in the left column, you see that now this one element was added here. Now that we got a book in here, let's go back to our Node code, and there we can now change then. And now this is something provided by the fact that we're using promise here when exporting the pool. We now get back promises when executing queries, like this with execute. And promises have two functions, then and catch. Let's explore them in the next lecture.